think you're live now. I see it in the corner that you're streaming now, so.
Yes,
Okay.
we are live.
Alrighty, then I'm going to call to session the Common Council Ordinance Committee. Today it's July 21st, 2020, and I'm going to do a roll call. David Hovelman,
Present.
Dominique Johnson, Tom Keegan,
Here.
Manny Langella,
Here.
Tom Livingston,
Here.
Kadeem Roberts,
Present.
and I'm Lisa Shanahan. I'm the chair of the committee. And what we're going to do first is we're going to have a public hearing and a discussion on the Enterprise Zone Chapter 36. Do we have anybody who is here to make a public comment online?
There is one call-in listener, but it might be the minutes taker. I'll allow you to talk just to say who you are, if you're here for comment or if you're just the minutes. So number ending in 2. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm taking the minutes. It's 9502, the last four digits.
Perfect,
Yep,
thanks.
okay, thanks.
Great, thank you.
That's
So we
the-
have nobody live to speak, but I think, Brian, you have a letter to read.
Yes, let me just pull that up real quick. All right, so we received an email today. I just need to find it. Here it is. And it is from Michael F. Descala, President and Chief Operating Officer of MF Descala and Company Incorporated, 1 Smith Street, Building B, Suite 101, Norwalk, Connecticut, 06851. And it is concerning the matter which we have a public hearing on tonight, which is the Enterprise Zone. The email, the subject is Innovation Zone, Wall Street area. He indicates in his email, please be advised that MF Descala and Company is the designated developer for Head of the Harbor North, which is currently the municipal parking on the corner of Main, Wall, and High Street. As a result of the city advancing the POCO project, we are now interested in further enhancing the Wall Street area by constructing upscale 80-unit apartment project on that site. Please see attached rendering and tentative plans, which may not be the final design, but it is representative of what can be built there. Unfortunately, we cannot afford to build if the current tax structure in Norwalk is assessed against this property. Without tax relief, we cannot build the project. We are hereby asking the city to approve the proposed tax incentives for the area to benefit our project as well as other potential development in the area. End of the email.
Okay, great. So that's the end of any public comment. And so now it's up to our committee to discuss the Chapter 36 and then also to vote to whether we want to move it on to Common Council. And there was some discussion with Brian, Tom, and I with the tax assessor today, because he did have one question and I was going to let Tom describe how we resolved his concern.
Well, Brian, why don't you tell what his concern was first?
Sure. Actually, Bill has actually just sent me an email asking me if he can get an invitation to come to the meeting. I don't know if that's possible for someone to send him the email. And then I can certainly.
Yes, who is it?
It's Bill Ford, wford@norwalkconnecticut.org.
Yeah, I'll send it right now.
Thank you, Larry. Let me just pull up the email.
Oh, if I might, while he's doing that, just a couple questions for Sabrina. So the Scala's property is not in the enterprise zone now, but would be if this was approved, right?
Correct.
And to your knowledge, has he pulled any permits for this, his project?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, I found the email, Tom. I don't know if you have any more questions for Sabrina.
Are there
No.
other, well, we might as well, while we're waiting for Bill to come.
Yeah, please, go ahead. Yep.
Are there other projects that you know of that have pulled permits for this area that would be affected by this ordinance?
There are projects that are proposed, but they haven't been approved through an official process via a permit yet. So the POCO Wall Street Place development is one of them. The Pinnacle development is another one of them. They had permits originally. I'm not sure if they're expired at this point or not in time. And then the hospitals development, but since they have a different tax structure because they're the hospital, I don't believe they would be able to take advantage of it anyways. But those are kind of the ones that are in the pipeline that we specifically know of that could potentially be affected.
But to be clear, POCO, Wall Street Place, would not be
Correct.
eligible for this.
Wall Street Place has their own
They have
tax,
their own, right?
was
Okay.
already in the LDA, so they would not be applicable to get additional abatement or
Right.
different abatement of any kind because of this.
Do other committee members have other questions of Sabrina before we engage Mr. Ford?
Does the Garden Cinema property fall in Wall Street Place, or was that fall in the enterprise zone?
It's well, it falls in both, but because that specific parcel is being treated as the same project, it would fall under the new LDA and the tax abatement structure, not any of this.
So this would not affect that. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That was my question.
LDA means they can't, as you said, take any other tax abatements that would be offered by the enterprise.
Correct, because they have their own tax abatement structure that's in that LDA, so it doesn't have, we're not giving additional or a different one than what was agreed upon in that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Other questions? I thought I saw Mr. Ford show up and then I think I saw him disappear. Is he on? Can you see if he's on?
I don't see him, so I don't think he's here.
Lisa, I have a question. Are we going to discuss the changes to each of the references in the actual ordinance? Are we doing that later in this meeting?
We could do it at this time because this is the time when we're going to make it, absolutely
Okay.
cleaned up for sending it to the Common Council.
Okay.
Bill is
for
here
instance,
now.
just in my question, I have a couple actually about in 36.1 applicability. We took out the list of the census tracts and we reference a map. So are we going to identify the census tracts that are in the enterprise zone in the ordinance or not?
I think that we were going to use the map for clarity.
Yep. So Tom, just to address that a little bit further, the reason why we decided upon the map is because the specific boundaries are actually included in the map. If you were to say census tract 437 and census tract 441, it wouldn't really make sense. Plus our current enterprise zone kind of falls into other census tracts as well. So it's hard to know the specific geography without actually referencing a map.
Okay. Another question I have is in,
Actually, Tom, if I might, before you go ahead, since we're approving this in the council, I think it'd be helpful to have that map attached to this.
Sure.
So we're actually approving that.
Sure, I can make that, no problem. I already have it, so I can just include it.
Good idea.
Sorry.
ready for me? Sorry.
Sorry, Tom.
There's a couple other questions I have in. I got so much written down. In subsection C, you reference $80 million. I really don't understand what we're saying in that. Can you give me some scenarios of how that would work? You see it?
Yep, I'm just reading it, sorry. I mean, not just reading it for the first time, but just reading it specifics.
Yeah, I mean, it's wordy. I get it.
Tom, most of the language is right from the Connecticut statute.
Yeah, that's something that was a state statute. Just pulled directly from it so that we can be consistent.
Do we know a
But-
reason? This is
Yeah,
David,
my
do we have a reason for that
understanding
cap?
was, David, my understanding was, and Tom, hopefully this answers your question, was without that language, developers could claim that we weren't asserting this right to tax somebody, that they could seek assessments which exceed $80 million, and that we'd be waiving that right to not be able to tax them on anything over $80 million. So by placing this language in, which is within the Connecticut general statute, so we have the authority to do it, we're basically saying that if you have a project that is in excess of $80 million, we're not we can still tax that over the $80 million threshold plateau. That was my understanding of that.
Yeah, it's so that we're not losing out on a more significant project amount, tax amount.
I guess example wise would be if the project is worth $100 million, if we didn't have this language in there, then once we got to the $80 million, we couldn't tax them on that $20 million. But with this language, they're not getting some kind of exception. And by us having this language in our ordinance, they're not claiming, well, you guys didn't have it in there, so therefore you waived it. We don't want to waive that ability.
Correct.
Okay, and one last question is under 36.3, we have reports, and it's asking DECD to prepare for the council no less frequency than every 3 years a detailed report, much like what Jessica presented in May.
Yep.
But I think we've removed the ability for the Common Council to, before this expires, end the enterprise zone. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, so we have
Even if the reports come back that this is an absolute disaster, that there's nothing can be done until the 11th year. Personally, I think that's something that should be looked at.
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but they could go through this same process to repeal it as we have done to extend it. The sunset provision is just to take it away after a certain period of time. So
Yeah.
it turns out it's a complete disaster. The council, well, staff, obviously, and you guys on the Ordinance Committee could do the process again to then repeal it before that time.
Repeal it, amend it,
Yeah.
whatever changes the Ordinance Committee would deem appropriate. The one thing, well, in this scenario, this ordinance is not going to be effective if it's passed by the Ordinance Committee and then passed by the Common Council. It still needs to be reviewed and approved by the State Economic and Community Development Department. And so even if we approve it as an Ordinance Committee and then go on to Common Council, it still needs approval from the state. And that's because we're adding a census tract. In terms of the ordinance itself, the Ordinance Committee has the power, and the Common Council has the power if the Ordinance Committee provides a recommendation, whether positive or negative on an ordinance. They have the right to amend, repeal, add. They can create ordinances, which we've done. They can limit them, they can expand them, and they can repeal them. The Ordinance Committee has that power.
Yep. So just because it's not explicitly in there, it's not written in stone.
Well, it looks like it was, and it's been removed. If you look at 36.4, it says the sunset provision. It says this chapter shall expire and be repealed on July 1, 2030, unless extended by the Common Council. And then
Yeah, I
we've
think we added
removed.
that entirely. I don't think we had a sunset provision before, and we decided that we ought to add one for this purpose.
Yeah.
So basically, in response to a question about providing information to the public and also to the Common Council about the current use of the tax abatements in the enterprise zone, because there was no sunset provision before, which is why this provision, why 36-4 is all in red, is because it's new. So that what this provision does is, and this might go back a little bit, it doesn't, while you guys have the power to amend, repeal, and expand, as I've noted, this sunset provision also says, if it's unclear, if it looks like it's working, but no one's really sure, after 11 years on July 1, 2030, if the Common Council has said we've had enough of this, then you don't have to do anything and it'll expire. It takes an affirmative vote by the Common Council in order for this to continue past July 1, 2030. And as I've indicated before, just in response to Tom's question, the Ordinance Committee can do something with this before July 1, 2030. This July 1, 2030 date is simply so that 10 years from now, 11 years from now, if we have new committee members, this isn't forgotten about, because in 8 to 10 years, we might have new people on Common Council or Ordinance Committee. We might only have a couple, And so we don't want to do is we don't want to have this forgotten. And so that's why we put this sunset provision in. The Ordinance Committee, again, still has the power to expand, repeal, or amend this ordinance prior to July 1, 2030. We just thought it was good to have a back end date so that if nothing is done at that point, the committee and the council would be forced to look at this ordinance again.
And we also like the idea of the reporting because there wasn't really a reporting requirement in the prior enterprise zone. And we thought it was important to have this brought in front of council for renewal and understanding of how effective it is.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody
Mr.
else
David,
before we
you-
ask Bill? Oh, good.
I have a couple questions. One is in this. I love the sunset provision. I think it's a smart move. I just questioned, similar to what Tom was asking. It's the language that you have removed from code on or before the expiration date. But you're saying it's implicit that we can remove this from the code at any time if we had wanted to.
Correct.
There.
I mean, obviously, I have to go into the code a lot more often than the rest of you, but there are numerous sections within the code. If you were to go through it and type in repealed, numerous things would come up in the search engine to show that ordinances have been repealed, restricted. We've expanded the noise ordinance. We've created new ordinances. And so if the Ordinance Committee can create new ordinances, then they can repeal, amend, or restrict current ordinances.
Great. The next question I have is just the use of in the reporting section in 36.3 to report upon request. No less frequently than every 3 years. So every three, is that meaning that we can request a
More
report
frequent.
sooner at any time, but we have to get a report every 3 years?
Correct, David.
Okay, I just wanted clarity on that.
Yeah, every 3 years, you guys are going to get a report to the Common Council and the mayor. It'll be delivered. But let's say there's a bigger project going on, and you'd like an update as to, or we're in year 2, and you guys want to find out how's it going. Are a lot of people applying to this, or what's the use of it? Then you can get that update.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Quick question on, I guess it's 36, is it 36.2 G? What is the manufacturing facility that exempts it from? What do you know what that is in the Connecticut statutes? I couldn't find it. And
No, but I can pull it up real quick if no one knows the answer to that.
I'm just curious as to what specific type of manufacturing or industrial use that is not.
I will pull that up right now. Hold on 1 second.
And then I had one. When we get into section D, these are additional deferments, correct? So so these could be other additional requests that we can honor or not honor through vote of the council. Is that correct?
That's
Correct. So the 36.2B are the statutory requirements, and D allows for further ones if but people have to affirmatively ask for that. They're not given that unless they ask, and the Common Council would have to decide that as well.
Okay, but the statutory ones are the what is listed as the 1st through 7th year of that deferment, that tax deferment.
That is correct, and I'm looking up the other question you had about manufacturing right now. Bear with me.
The reason I asked the question is when you sent the letter that we got earlier, it made me wonder that, a developer or, a property owner could come along and say, well, I need this, and this as well in order to do this, but that's a special request, and when we vote on it.
That's a special request, and they don't get it unless you guys approve
Unless
it.
you approve it. Okay, great. So
And I'm getting to D. So, so subsection D under 32-9P, subsection D, manufacturing facility. It's quite long, but it means any plant, building, or other real property improvement or part thereof, which is A, constructed or substantially renovated or expanded on or after July 1, 1978 in a distressed municipality, a targeted investment community as defined in section 32-222, an enterprise zone designated pursuant to 3270, or an airport development. And then under subsection 2, it says, which is to be used for the manufacturing, processing, or assembling of raw materials, parts, or manufactured products for research and development facilities directly related to manufacturing. for the significant servicing, overhauling, or rebuilding of machinery and equipment for industrial use, or except as provided in this subsection for warehousing and distribution. And it goes
So
on,
somebody-
but that's,
That
Yeah.
there's a vagary there that makes me that just the question I have is then do we, somebody who comes along, a mixed use space, but you know, a small machine shop that goes in there that manufactures product, takes raw material, manufactures, could make that ineligible, correct?
The question I have, is this part of the state statute though, that we're mimicking? So this is what the state restricts. And
Correct.
we want to be within the four corners of what the state requires.
No, and I understand that. I'm trying to get a handle on just an understanding of that type of thing can exempt someone at that point in a mixed use type space.
It would exempt a portion of it.
A portion, okay.
Yeah, so for example, you could have a mixed use building where they're not taking, because you have the residential affordability component. If they don't want to exempt any of that, there is the potential to exempt a portion of that, but that becomes a special, that part that falls into kind of a special exemption. So that would be something that would have to be approved on kind of like a one-off.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those were my only questions, Lisa.
Yeah,
Thank
and the reason for that specifically is because the enterprise zone is also a state program that allows us to do these property tax exemptions, but manufacturing facilities have a special section in enterprise zone as well, where they as a business get an exemption. So it's not the property owner getting an exemption, it's the actual business getting an exemption.
you. Okay,
Interesting.
I
They
see.
try not to double dip. That's kind of why they put that.
all right. That makes,
That's
they
That-
specifically, in 3270, they specifically indicate that the commissioner may also include in the area designated as an enterprise zone, any facility as defined in section 32-9P, which is the section that we reference in our ordinance, which is located outside of but contiguous to a census tract included in the zone. So there, like Sabrina just said, the manufacturing has their own state thing as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you. That's a great question. So Bill, we see that you're on with us and we wanted to have you describe to us what issue you were hoping that we would resolve. And Tom Livingston has come up with language and we want to make sure that as between the two of you, we've addressed your concern.
So I read the language that Tom proposed. I think it's excellent. My concern was when we're adding a new census tract or a new location into a district, quite often somebody that got a certificate of occupancy a year or two ago would now try to get the exemption when it wasn't part of the original plan at the time that that property was completed. That was my only concern. I think the new language is excellent.
Okay, great. And then Tom, you've got the language in front of you. Do you want to read how you
Yeah.
addressed it?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. It's also, I mean, not just me, Brian also. So it would be a new section 36-5 entitled "When Effective." And it reads, "This chapter shall be effective 10 days following approval by Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development and shall only be applicable to projects completed after such date and that otherwise comply with the terms of this chapter." So as Brian said, this has to be approved by Connecticut DEP before it goes into effect anyway. So we want to make that clear in the statute. And then also add the language that Bill Ford just referenced about only be applicable to projects completed after that date. So I can read it again if you want. I propose an amendment to for this language. And I'll read it again. So a new section 36-5, when effective. This chapter shall be effective 10 days following approval by Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development and shall only be applicable to projects completed after such date and that otherwise comply with the terms of this chapter.
Does anybody need to see it in any other form to understand what we're doing? We're just trying to put a stake in the ground as to what projects qualify.
Does that mean that as the enterprise zone deferments don't kick in until they get a CO? So somebody who's completing work, they haven't finished completing, they haven't gotten their CO, could, if there was a project going on right now, if the CO falls after that date, they could get that.
With application.
Right. Okay.
Yes, and we have a few
Yeah.
projects that have already contacted Sabrina. They've already received their letter stating that they're in a district that is appropriate. They've been in contact with me. We've had discussions. I've advised them of the new income limits for the residential side so that they're preparing in advance. They know what the requirements are and they're going to be on schedule to receive them.
But Bill, we understand that no permits have been pulled on any projects as of yet. Is that right?
Bill's referencing the current enterprise zone. So
Oh,
that's
the current, oh, sorry, yeah. Gotcha.
Thank you, Sabrina.
no problem.
Thanks for clarifying. Bill wasn't part of the conversation earlier, so I want to make sure we made that
Correct.
clarification. All right, so I think we're at the place where we would vote to send this to Common Council with the amendment that Tom just referenced, unless there's further discussion or questions. Would somebody move? This,
I'll move it. I'll
Thank you,
move it as
Tom.
amended.
As amended. Great. So I'll just do a roll call if that's okay. David Hoovelman, would you like, I guess the motion is to move this to Common Council for vote. David?
Aye.
Great. Dominique?
Yes.
Yes? Gotcha. Tom Keegan?
No.
No? Manny Langella?
Yes.
Tom Livingston?
Yes.
Kadeem Roberts?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So that would be 6 yeses and 1 no. So the next thing on our agenda is public comment on other ordinance matters. And I don't believe that we have anybody who is in queue, do we?
We
So-
do not.
No. So we can close public comment. Our next agenda item is the acceptance of minutes. I actually had a couple of changes. Where did they go? Sorry? Somebody else? Let me find these minutes that I moved underneath. Ah, sorry, gang. That's what happens when I got all those papers. Oh, here we go. So, on the minutes, does anybody have any changes themselves? Nope. I had 1 or 2, and if I must have buried them here. Here they are. Okay, perfect. My concern was, sorry, gang. Prohibited gift part, we wanted to look at. Here we go. Lord's at the bottom. I think that there is a misspelled word at the bottom of discussion item. It says that Ms. Shanahan said she and Ms. Johnson are getting comments about dog leash laws. There's missing an H. And the other change we're going to make also under discussion item was that Mr. Candela updated the committee on his progress of updating the ordinance. In the next sentence, I thought it would be more clear if we said he noted he's been going through the ordinance as time allows and has completed work on about half of the code. That's with reference to doing the gender update. So
What pages were those, Lisa?
that was on page 3 of the minutes.
Both on page 3?
Yes.
No, page 4.
Page 4, sorry. There's no page numbers on these, so I was counting.
Yeah, on the bottom
All
there.
right.
Okay, great. Those are my.
And you said he noted that he'd been going through.
It said he, instead of saying he has gone through about half, I thought that just was unclear what it was referring to. So I would prefer to say has completed work on about half of the code.
Yeah, noted that he has completed work on half of the code. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then our next agenda item, I think, is.
Lisa, you need to have a
I
motion.
know, I need to have a motion. So does somebody have a motion to move to accept the minutes? Thank you, Tom. And can we do that just by voice vote? Is there anybody who objects to the minutes as amended? All right, so that carries with 7 votes. Okay, so old business is discuss and vote Code of Ethics, section 32(8) prohibited gifts. And I'm not sure if anybody had a chance to take a look at those. Tom and I looked at it, and the one big change with Brian. And I think the one big change that we thought we ought to address is that 32(8)(c)(6) and 8(c)(12) are redundant. So we thought that we would combine 6 into 12 or 12 into 6. Anything else, Brian, that we wanted to bring to the committee that I'm forgetting?
Hold on one second.
Yeah, I had the language on what was 12 because to add in that the certificates, plaques, or other ceremonial awards having a value of not more than $200 given to an officer or employee.
Yeah, or employee, which is consistent. That's consistent with every other change we've made in the Code of Ethics and all the other sections, because we want to make sure that this Code of Ethics applies not only to employees, but also to officers, who would include people that are either elected or appointed to positions in the government.
Yeah, so I guess, Brian, we haven't really talked about it, but I guess you'd be moving 12 up to replace 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would make sense. I think it would make sense to take the language in 12, which is a little bit more complete, and moving it up and just replacing 6 with 12. So 12 would move up and replace 6.
Okay. There's also a typo in 7, goods
Yeah,
or
I was
services
going to point that
provided.
out too.
And I also, of course, has some comments, which I'll give you separately.
Where is the typo?
In paragraph 8, goods or services provided.
Oh, provided to the city. Okay, 8. Yep.
And then in number 9, there's also a typo, I think. Meals and refreshments served in an individual's home. Individuals misspelled.
It is?
The first I was a lowercase I, and it was crossed out. You just can't see it.
Oh, okay, good.
So
Yeah.
individual is a defined term, so that's why
Gotcha. Okay.
it probably would have made more sense if I just deleted the entire thing and rewrote it, so it was easier to see. But yes.
Thank you, because it
Yep.
doesn't look like crossed out. It looks like it's
Yeah.
mistyped. Okay, perfect. Does anyone else have any comments on this section?
I'm curious as to why we took the money out of 7. You put in the not exceeding $150, the $150 in value, and it struck out. And I'm curious why we took out the monetary reference in that.
This is has been given to us by the Ethics Committee. Do you have any comments, Mr. Garcia?
So in fairness to Tony has
Oh,
been
sorry.
on the committee for 2 months.
Yeah.
And so this change was made some time ago. Let me see here.
I'm just curious, we have money values in other items in here.
That's correct.
And then this one
yeah.
is struck, so I'm just curious as to what the rationale for that was, to not have an exempt. And the same thing happens in C2. They struck out the minor monetary value and a definition of what that is.
Yeah, so I don't know the reason behind why they struck out the monetary value. It's not popping into my head as to why. In 32(8)(a), it does have a monetary value, and that concerns gifts or services or compensation. And so perhaps they thought that. Well, let's see. Hold on one second. A is prohibited. A is you can't do it. C are exceptions.
Right.
And so the exceptions would be if you're attending a charitable event, and as long as they're not using it to try and influence you, so there's no numerical value there. In answer to your question, David, I don't know why they eliminated
Okay.
$100 or $50, not exceeding that. I don't know why they did that in number 2 and number 7.
Mr. Lopez, were you part of that conversation at all? Do you remember?
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, I think he's frozen too.
No, I
there he
was
is.
not.
Oh, that's his picture. Oh, there we
Okay,
go.
good. Great. I mean, I will say that Brian and I went through this for a little while. We went kind of back and forth because you can sometimes go to a charitable event and people, there's like a goodie bag and, everybody gets the same gift. But on the other hand, if you're at a special event and you're speaking and somebody gives you a gift, again, it's an awkward situation, but 150 doesn't.
So just so you're aware, the Board of Ethics has a meeting scheduled for this coming Thursday, and we're planning to proceed forward. The agenda will be posted tomorrow morning. and will be emailed out to all the Board of Ethics members. We are going to be discussing 32.4 conflicts of interest, because we're hoping that that will also be placed on pretty soon. But as it pertains to 32.8, I can raise that issue with them, David, about subsection C2 and C7, and report back to you whether it be, again, under old business or at a public hearing in August. But in answer to your question,
Great.
I will ask them specifically this question.
That's fine. Those are the only questions that I had. So
Yeah.
the rest of it is very clear.
Do we
And
have
I
a sense of the committee?
it
Do we
tunes
want
it
to
up very
forward
well.
it on to council, or do we want to wait another month?
We have to go to
We have to
we
do
would have to go to
public
public
I mean,
hearing.
go for public hearing, I meant to say that, yeah. So,
So
I
I
mean,
think
we
Let's
wanna
just
move it to
move
public-
to public hearing.
I feel like we can move it to public hearing, and if
Yeah,
there's going
I
to be a
agree.
change, we can make the adjustment. Okay, so can I take a vote for moving it to public hearing? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So that passes unanimously. Okay, so that is where we're going with that. Now, the next part of new business is just to alert the committee that we are, have been asked by the mayor to consider addressing a situation that happened in Calf Pasture Beach, and he wants to expand it to Veterans Park as well as Taylor's Farm. And we're considering, if we're going to consider this, maybe making it a more broad consideration about banning hunting on city property. And while we're considering banning hunting on city property, there is also thought that maybe what we should do is say that guns shouldn't be allowed on any city premises. So I wanted to get a sense of the committee, what people might think about that, moving in that direction.
Are guns allowed now in a city park?
They are allowed in Calf Pasture Beach, yeah, you're allowed to go duck hunting. We have a special exemption right now that we are working with Deep on. The mayor thought that it was really kind of a dangerous situation for people to be duck hunting. It's also kind of nerve-wracking for people to hear guns being exploded on properties and whatnot. So he's asked for a 1-year exemption, but that 1-year exemption of being able to bring guns on to have this hunting. But this 1-year exemption was to expire this summer. With COVID, things have gotten a little extended, but he would like us to address this issue in the near future. Of course, this is for us to decide. It's our ordinance, but he has asked that we take this under advisement. I just want to get a sense of what people think.
David, you can have guns in city buildings unless the city says no. So.
So we have a sign at City Hall that prohibits people from bringing weapons in unless you're like a police officer. So if the police officers come in to meet with a department, they're coming in with their weapons. But people who are not police officers or who don't meet the exceptions to that rule are not allowed into the building, because Connecticut General Statutes 29-28 subsection E indicates that you're not allowed into a premises where the person who controls the property does not want guns to come onto their property.
Right, and I understand how that applies to people who have a CCW and
Yep.
and that. But what my question is based on the way the discharging of firearms for hunting purposes there are very specific rules within distances of buildings and that. So a lot of those rules apply at places like Calf Pasture. I thought the issue was that it was the hunters that come into from the water. And I'm not sure how we have to figure out how we can write an ordinance that stops them coming up from a boat, because a lot of duck hunting is done from a boat, and they come up towards the shore and discharge a weapon. They're within the legal distance of everything, but it is, I mean, I agree. I'm surprised we don't have one, and I'm all for moving this forward and having this discussion about parks.
David, just to answer your question a little bit, I did go through some of the other municipalities, and numerous municipalities have limitations on carrying and discharging firearms in, some of them say city parks, some of them say city property. So there are numerous ones that have done this. And just from speaking with those municipal lawyers, None of them have done it recently, but the argument was it would be under Title VII, which is the police powers, specifically scope of municipal powers. And that's, basically the ability to preserve this health, safety, and welfare of people. In order for you guys to take a look at what we have so far, Chapter 38 of the ordinances is entitled, there's two articles. One of them, there's Article 1 and Article 2. Chapter 38 is entitled Explosives, and Article 1, Section 38-2 talks about firearms specifically, and then Article 2 talks about fireworks and firecrackers. I think for you to get a little bit more information, David, and hopefully it can answer your question better than I can, 38-2 specifically discusses firearms, and then there are exceptions that are identified in the ordinance. And these go back as far as the last amendment I see is from 1980. So we're talking about 40 years ago. But this basically 38-2 says no air rifles, air pistols, cannons, guns, pistols, revolvers, rifles, shotguns, or other firearms shall be discharged within the limits of the city except as follows. And then it has A, B, C, D, E, F. So there are 6 exceptions to this ordinance that says you cannot discharge firearms within the limits of the city. One of them talks about if you're at a fire range operated by the police department. So I guess if you're in their firing range. B talks about discharge of a shotgun by a duly licensed hunter of the state using a number 4 shot load from a shotgun. C has been reserved. So there is none there. D is talking about this section shall not apply to the discharge of firearms to protect life or property. E talks about discharging of firearms by property owners, their employees or agents to kill vermin or wild animals which are destroying property. And then F says the discharge of shotguns shall not be within 100 feet of a public or private highway or within 500 feet of a dwelling. So that goes back to your point about discharging close to buildings and things of that nature. So 38-2 might be a good place to start for everybody, but Chapter 38 is the ordinance that discusses explosives and firearms and fireworks.
Can I just comment that there are 2 aspects of this we're looking at. One is the hunting aspect and the other is the carrying the weapons aspect, right? So that's the 2 things we have to deal with. So
I think when we were thinking
and
about
Tom's
it,
correct.
that it's sort of a time to think about hunting because we're there. But if we're going to consider city private premises about when guns are going to be carried, this would be their time to address the entire concern. Sorry, Brian, I think I overspoke.
No, that's fine. I jumped over you. Basically, this only talks about, our ordinance only talks about the discharge of firearms. It doesn't talking about carrying of firearms. Now, specifically, as we referenced before, the city hall, you're not allowed to carry it into the building. So we're talking about carrying or discharging. I'm just trying to give you an example here of one that jumped out to me. So Bridgeport specifically, and I've asked their counsel to provide me with any backup materials that they might have. They have not responded. Bridgeport's ordinance says no person shall carry or have any firearms in any of the city parks, and no firearms, firecrackers, torpedoes, or fireworks shall be discharged in such parks except by permission of the Board of Park Commissioners. So that's one where they're saying you can't even carry them into a city park. There's other examples. I can, if you would like, I can email you all a copy of this, of these documents that I've pulled together in order for you guys to take a look at this, because I knew we were just going to be initially discussing it tonight. I can email this to all of you so you have a chance to take a look at all of the materials, including some of the ordinances I was able to find.
I think that'd be really helpful, Brian, because when going
Yeah.
through that, you can see how consistent other towns in our region are about making sure that there aren't guns carried on parks and recreational spaces and city, city premises. And
I've got a point that I want. Do we have any problems with hunters at Vets Park and Cat Pasture? We know.
well, let me read do you want me to read the mayor's letter that he sent to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if this is an issue. The other thing I wanted to say is in reference to not discharging firearms within 100 feet of a public roadway. wouldn't the road around Vets Park and the road around Calf Pasture be defined as public highways? I think it's public highway personally. So we may have laws in place right now that, we should look at as well.
I'll read you the letter that the mayor sent to Deep, and then I'll read you what Deep said back so that you guys all have the background, and then we'll certainly put this in the packet for us to consider. This is what the mayor wrote. Commissioner Dykes, I am writing to express my support by any means that the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection could enact that would make Calf Pasture Beach, Taylor Farm, and Veterans Park in Norwalk off limits to hunting. Both when I was police chief and now as mayor, I have received many inquiries and complaints about hunting that occurs at these areas. It's unsafe because of the number of people who walk and enjoy the park and beach, and it makes them uncomfortable. Moreover, the noise from the discharge of the weapons is very frightening. We must do something. That is why I'm encouraging the leadership of the Norwalk Common Council to bring forward a new ordinance that would ban firearms at Calf Pasture Beach, Taylor Farm, and Veterans Park. It's truly a safety issue to allow firearms in such close proximity to children and families who are merely trying to enjoy our wonderful facilities. While nothing's guaranteed, I'm optimistic a favorable vote in support of this new ordinance can be achieved in the near future. I hope that the state will strengthen our proposal with its own measures. This was dated May 24th, 2019. And she
And just to jump on that, Lisa, within the packet I'm going to send to you, there's a letter from, let's see, Katie Dykes, Commissioner of Deep, and this is dated May of 2019. And in there, the moratorium on hunting that was placed, it would still allow, she said, please be advised that although no waterfowl hunting will be allowed in the area as described in the attached announcement, waterfowl hunters will still be allowed to transport their unloaded firearms from their vehicles to the boat launch located at Vets Park in order to allow them access to Long Island Sound. So I think it's kind of a joint, it gives a little bit more information. I know because David asked specifically about the hunters that are in the water.
Right. And that was the letter I was going to, the second letter I was going to.
Sorry.
Yeah, so that's May 29th, 2019. So we'll put that in your packet as well, which she says. She did establish a closed area to waterfowl hunting until May 31, 2020 in the area of Calf Pasture Beach, Taylor Farm, and Veterans Park is more fully described in her announcement of temporary closure. And then she's instructing her staff to conduct a hunting review assessment of the area, which I think, Brian, we asked you to reach out to her, or we were going to reach out to her about that. And then that's where we are. So it's, the issue's right. And the question is, what do we do? What further, if we're going to open up this can of worms, do we do something more broadly in the city and all city parks? Are we consistent across properties? And so that's the discussion that we thought we would start today and continue after you get your packets. And if there's more information that anybody thinks that they may want to look at in order to start this conversation, I'd be all ears.
I would like information on just what we're talking about, the hunting from a boat, what the distance is, what's Norwalk City property in Calf Pasture Beach? Does it end at the water line? Does it end 100 feet from the shoreline? How does that translate? Because this is going to be a huge part of this question. You have a hunter who has a flatboat that he's going to launch at Vets Park from a public boat ramp. He's going to have weapons with him to get into that boat to go out and legally hunt. So the question becomes is, where do we draw that line, and where is it within our statutory right to draw that line? I'm in full agreement that I don't think people should be discharging any weapon near any of those parks. I mean, but I'm just saying that we've got to figure out what that is, because this is going to cause a lot of debate and a lot of questions. So do we want to be?
So
we also need
sorry, David.
Archery. We have to think about archery when we're talking about hunting as well, and possibly falconry in the city parks. So because those are other hunting events that do take place.
So specifically, at least as it pertains to the Deep letter, which you'll find on page 27 of the packet, which I just forwarded to you, it says more specifically, such closure to hunting shall apply to a distance 250 feet waterward of the water's edge perpendicular to the shoreline, beginning at the easterly boundary of Taylor Farm Park and extending to the westerly boundary of Calf Pasture Beach, and include Norwalk River from the Washington Street Bridge to a line extending from the westerly boundary of Calf Pasture Beach to the easterly terminus of Neptune Avenue. This moratorium shall not prohibit waterfowl hunters from transporting their unloaded firearms from their vehicles to the boat launch located at Veterans Park in order to allow them access to Long Island Sound. It's all in the materials, but I just wanted to hope, I don't know if that answers your question, but I wanted to throw that out there.
No, that's very helpful. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, yep.
Great. Any other material that anybody wants to be added to the packet that might help you consider this? Sorry, Dominic.
Oh, sorry, Lisa. I'm just thinking if there's been confusion or issues that the police have had to deal with, for example, around folks thinking they can go into, say, Cranberry Park to hunt, even if it's with bow and arrow, or as David mentioned, perhaps falconry, that could be helpful. If residents are confused as to whether they can or can't do it, and then we do actually have instances of people hunting in parks, other than the 3 mentioned in the mayor's letter. I'm not sure if that would be helpful to folks, but
So
I'm just wondering, like, the specificity of those 3 parks.
maybe we should ask the police department if they have any reports of such activity.
We can reach out to Chief Kowalik. He wrote an accompanying letter, which you'll also find in the packet, to Commissioner Dykes along with Mayor Rilling. It's on page 30 of the packet, which you'll be able to see. He references Calf Pasture, Taylor Farm, and Veterans Park. It doesn't mention Cranberry Park, but that's something that we can find out if there have been complaints from all of the public parks and beaches, or are there specific places that are problematic more so than others.
Tom?
Yeah, just Brian, while you're asking, might want to find out if there've been any complaints about guns in any of the functions of the Gallagher Mansion. You know, some of the big parties people have had. I'd be curious to see if there are any police reports on any of those involving guns.
Because Tom, as you were saying before, if you don't post, it's not specifically prohibited, right?
That's right. That's what we've been told. If you don't post on a building, you can't stop it. So, you know, at a threshold point, I think we have to make that decision. And for me, it's a no-brainer, but we have to make it as a group that we're going to say no guns on city property. I mean, right now, without taking action, somebody could bring a gun into
The library.
I mean, City Hall, to be honest with you, I don't think we've ever taken the proper action to do that. So I think we need to. But I certainly don't want people walking around with guns in City Hall. And I don't know about schools where we have to do anything or not. I think that's covered by a different statute and state.
Schools, federal, and I think it's 50. You can't have a weapon within 1,500 feet.
And Brian, is it possible to get that information from Bridgeport, what they do in that municipality?
Yeah, so I emailed Kadeem, I emailed both Milford and Bridgeport. Attorney Bertram responded and said that it was prior to him being corporation counsel for Milford, but that he would look into it. And I emailed the corporation counsel for Bridgeport, and I was advised after I emailed them, which I did, that they would then send it on to one of their attorneys who I guess deals with these requests. I have not heard back. I will certainly follow up with both of them.
I only say that because as we try to mirror different municipalities, it's a different ballgame when you're dealing with Bridgeport as far as guns within parks and stuff like that. So that's why I just asked that question. But I definitely would like to see that. Thank you, though, Brian.
Yeah, in the packet, you'll see all manner of all different sizes of cities and towns that Brian researched on our behalf. So thank you for that, Brian. It was really very useful, I thought, to go through.
Yep, and David, just in response, just to add on to your question, by law, it's a crime to possess a firearm on school property or at school-sponsored events, and that's a Connecticut General Statute 53A-217B, and so that was passed, I believe, recently. I don't know the specific date, but that's one from the one of the papers by the Office of Legislative Research for the state of Connecticut. So they're identifying not only is there federal law, but there's also state law that you can't possess, not even fire, just possess a firearm on school property or at a school-sponsored event.
Okay. So to keep things moving, we just wanted to bring that to your attention, tell you what's in the packet and get everybody's thoughts, and we'll talk about it next session.
And that packet has been emailed to all of you.
So thank you, Brian. You're
Thank
so
you, Brian.
on it. We love having you
Yep.
so on it like that. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we have to go into executive session. So I need a motion that we go into executive session. Thank
So
you,
moved.
Kadeem. And what's going to happen is we're going to leave this meeting. We're going to join that other session that's in your email, and we'll reconvene there. And then Sabrina, you're keeping this open so we can rejoin this later.
I'm keeping this open and I'm pausing the recording so it won't be recorded, and we'll press play when you guys come back in.
Okay, good. So let's all exit and I'll see you in another room.
Hi, is that Larry? I can't hear you. You're muted.
Yes, it is.
I wasn't sure if I had access, but I couldn't gain access
You needed access to what?
to the meeting, the executive. I
Oh, you
wasn't
need
sure if I
access-
was permitted. I wasn't sure if I was permitted or if I was given access because I looked for it and I couldn't find that link.
Tony Lopez. You're Tony Lopez?
Yes.
And you're part of the executive session?
No, I'm actually with the Ethics Committee.
Oh, okay.
I was in the meeting before they went to the executive session.
Right.
Tony, I'm not sure because the way executive session works, they have to invite you.
Right. That's what I thought. That's why I wasn't sure because I went back to the email to look to see maybe there's a separate link and there wasn't. So I wasn't sure about that. Okay, that's
Right.
fine.
Okay.
I'll wait for them to gather back. I'll just hang around and I suppose they'll come back in shortly, right?
Yep, they come back and then they have to vote for the record on this meeting. So they'll have
Okay.
to do that.
Thank you.
No
Yeah.
problem.
All right. So no one could get into the meeting, Sabrina. When I went to start it, it said the meeting has expired.
That's weird. Why?
So I panicked. Yeah. What happened was I set the meeting for I said, I'll make it for 7:15. It doesn't matter what time. But Zoom, like 15 minutes after the time you set, it actually expires a meeting. So I didn't realize that. So I actually
Yeah.
had to go to the previous meetings, had to find the expired meeting and go back and start up a new meeting.
Huh. That's interesting.
So yeah, I didn't realize Zoom would expire a meeting if you don't start it on time
Yeah.
or within 15 minutes. So anyway, they're all in and they're in executive session.
Yeah. Hopefully it's quick.
Yeah, you never know.
I've been in executive sessions where I'm waiting outside for like 2-3 hours.
I waited outside today for like an hour and a half
Yeah.
for another one, fire commission. Yeah.
Yeah, the redevelopment agency did when POCO like first came around the first time,
Mm-hmm.
they did that in executive session for like close to 3 hours, and it was like a night meeting in person, and I had an item after the executive session, so I was literally there until like almost they closed us inside of City Hall.
Yeah, it's
Crazy.
all right. So we'll talk to you in about an hour.
Sounds good.
So Tony, just to let you know, usually they just come back and they vote or they don't vote and then they close the meeting, right?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. So they,
Okay, right. So there's no reason for me to hang around.
no, I don't. I don't think you need to wait around.
Okay. I just
No,
wasn't sure if I was gonna, in other words, the purpose of me attending was of course to get the access to some of the information on what's being discussed.
Mhm.
So that I could just, in other words, be informed for the ethics committee that's coming up on Thursday. So
Okay.
I just thought that I'd drop in for that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, you're not going to pick up any more information. All the meetings are recorded. You could go on our website, norwalkct.org/meetings.
Okay.
And you can find all the meetings. So even this meeting, at the last, is going to be like 30 seconds and then the meeting's going to be ended. That's
Okay.
so if you want to hear even what they say there, you could just look for it tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So long. Have a good night.
All right. Yep. Bye-bye.
much smoother.
Yeah.
It's the night of the cats, by the way, with Manny and Tom.
I know. My cats are hungry, so it's like they won't leave me alone.
I'm scared of cats. I see them walk right past you. My eyes lit up like, whoa,
I saw that, Kadeem. I saw your eyes.
I'm scared of cats.
Tom Keegan has lost his cat. I don't see that cat in the window anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, he's here somewhere. Trust me. The king of the castle. That's him.
That's right.
All right, we're just waiting for Dominique to rejoin us, and I haven't heard from her that she can't, so
There
there
she
she is. Perfect. All righty, do we have everybody? It looks like we do. So we are reconvening after our executive session. No actions were taken. And at this time, I'm going to read our action item. The committee hereby acknowledges the receipt of a living wage complaint filed by Hans Jeans. We are going to order an investigation pursuant to Norwalk Ordinance 62-8 and appoint Lisa Shanahan and Manny Langella as its designees for purposes of said investigation. Can I have a motion to move this forward?
Motion.
Thank you, David. And all in favor? Are there any objections? No. So that passes 7-0. So I think that we are all caught up with our agenda. So the next thing to do is have an agenda, a motion to adjourn. Anybody want to? Tom Keegan. Great. Well, everybody have a great holiday month. I think we may not see each other for a little while. Thank you very much and look forward to the packets. And when you do receive the packets, let me know if there's any further information that you would like the whole committee to get. And Brian, thank you.
Lisa, do we know, are we having a common council meeting at the end of July, or is it just in August now?
I don't know the answer to that. Does
I've
anybody?
been led to believe we're not, but.
All right, I will prepare the enterprise zone ordinance to be sent to common council as if we're having a meeting next Tuesday.
Yeah, Barbara asked me about it and she was going to ask the mayor if he wanted to have a meeting specifically for this purpose, and I haven't heard back from her, but I'll send a note to her and you just to double check.
They
All right.
canceled the 28th meeting.
They did,
cancel
okay.
it for sure.
Yeah, Irene sent it out to all of us yesterday. So the next meeting's the 11th of August.
Good to know.
Oh,
Happy
good
holiday.
to know. Glad we're.
Good, it's good information. Well, so the motion to adjourn, everybody in favor? Great. Alrighty, thanks everybody. This was we had a lot to cover. I appreciate everybody's help.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
everybody.
Bye, gang.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
You too.